Do you feel that the pressures facing directors of sport now have changed from what they used to be?
Massively. And I say this a lot, I started as a director of sport over 20 years ago. There was no social media. There was very little email. I was just about learning how to use a computer. And my job as director of sport was really to make sure the teams are up on a whiteboard by Friday. So the teams would be ready to play. The shirts are washed, the balls are out, et cetera, et cetera. The job is massive nowadays. And it involves, so for instance, some directors of sport will have a budget of hundreds of thousands of pounds. Some people won't have a GCSE grade C in maths, or will have they're not mathematicians. In the current climate with VAT on school fees, people are being made redundant, for instance. And, we're not trained HR executives either. We're, safeguarding the gender balance quite rightly. I think maybe 20 years ago, rugby particularly was the main sport within independent schools. As long as your first team rugby team are doing all right. Whereas, quite rightly now, we've got so many different sports in schools, and there genuinely is now gender equality about, the performance of girls, what they're offered. You've got to mentor your department. You've got to be a performance coach. You've got to be a mental skills coach. There are just so many different plates nowadays that you have to spin. So it's a multi-skilled role now. And therefore, I think the training for it is really, really important.
Absolutely. So you alluded to earlier about sport needing to be enjoyable for young people. Why do you think it is that some environments can lose sight of that under the pressure to perform in their role? I
think because, and again, particularly in schools, let's take parents, for instance. If you read the back page of the Telegraph or the Daily Mail, it's, so-and-so's lost a football game at the weekend. They need to be sacked. GB didn't win enough Olympic gold medals at the last Olympics, so someone's head's got to roll. Manchester City, didn't win the Premiership this year, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we're not in that world. In my opinion, there's no such thing as elite sport in schools. So therefore, we have to work out, again, what is our purpose of schools, sport, and how we communicate that to people. I think that's the difficulty sometimes, is communicating to parents the multiple benefits of sport and physical activity beyond winning and losing. And quite often, again, if you ask anybody, tell me, a sports score of when you were 13, majority of people can't even tell you, but they can tell you the memories. They tell you their friends, or they can tell you a funny story from the back of the bus or the changing room or whatever it may be. So I do think that we need to be better communicating to, probably the two bodies we need to be better to communicate to are our parents and our senior leadership team. And